The First Spanish Republic was the short-lived political regime that existed in Spain between the parliamentary proclamation on the 11th of February 1873 and the 29th of December 1874, when General Arsenio Martínez Campos' pronunciamiento marked the beginning of the Bourbon Restoration in Spain. The Republic's founding started with the abdication as king on the 10th of February 1873 of Amadeo I, following the Hidalgo affair, when he had been required by the radical government to sign a decree against the artillery officers. The next day, the 11th of February, the Republic was declared by a parliamentary majority made up of radicals, Republicans and Democrats. Overview. The constituent Cortes was called upon to write a federal constitution. The radicals preferred a unitary republic, with a much lesser role for the provinces. And once the republic had been declared, the two parties turned against each other. Initially, the radicals were largely driven from power, joining those who had already been driven out by the Revolution of 1868 or by the Carlist War. The Republic was governed by four distinct presidents: Estanislao Figueras, Pi Margall, Nicolas Salmerón, Emilio Castella. Then, only 11 months after its proclamation, General Manuel Pavia led a coup d'état and established a unified republic dominated by Francisco Serrano. The period was marked by three simultaneous civil wars: the Third Carlist War, the Cantonal Revolution, the Petroleum Revolution in Alcoy, and by the 10 Years' War in Cuba. The gravest problems for the consolidation of the regime were the lack of true republicans, their division between federalists and unitarians, and the lack of popular support. Subversion in the army, a series of local cantonalist risings, instability in Barcelona, failed anti-federalist coups, calls for revolution by the International Workingmen's Association, the lack of any broad political legitimacy, and personal infighting among the Republican leadership all further weakened the Republic. The Republic effectively ended on January 3, 1874, when the Captain General of Madrid, Manuel Pavia, pronounced against the Federalist government and called on all parties except Federalists and Carlists to form a national government. The monarchists and Republicans refused, leaving the unitary radicals and constitutionalists as the only group willing to govern. Again, a narrow political base. General Francisco Serrano formed a new government and was appointed President of the Republic, although it was a mere formality since the Cortes had been dissolved. Carlist forces managed to expand the territory under their control to the greatest extent in early 1874, though a series of defeats by the Republic's Northern Army in the second half of the year might have led to the end of the war had it not been for bad weather. However, the other monarchists had taken the name of Alfonsis as supporters of Alfonso, the son of the former Queen Isabel, and were organized by Cánovas del Castillo. This period of the Republic lasted until Brigadier Martínez Campos pronounced for Alfonso in Sagunta on the 29th of December 1874, and the rest of the army refused to act against him. The government collapsed, leading to the end of the Republic and the restoration of the Bourbon monarchy with the proclamation of Alfonso XII as king. Proclamation of the Republic. King Amadeo I abdicated from the Spanish throne on the 11th of February 1873. His decision was mainly due to the constant difficulties he had to face during his short tenure, as the 10 Years' War, the outbreak of the Third Carlist War, the opposition from Alfonsino monarchists, which hoped for the Bourbon restoration in the person of Alfonso, son of Isabella II, the many Republican insurrections and the division among his own supporters. The Spanish Cortez, which were assembled in a joint and permanent session of both the Congress of Deputies and the Senate, declared themselves the National Assembly while waiting for any final notice from the king. The overwhelming majority was with the monarchists from the two dynastic parties that had exercised the government until then. the Radical Party of Manuel Ruiz Zorrilla and the Constitutional Party of Praxedes Mateo Sagasta. There also was a small Republican minority in the National Assembly, ideologically divided between federalism and centralism. One of them, Federalist parliamentarian Francisco Pi y Margall, moved the following proposal. The National Assembly assumes powers and declares the Republic as the form of government, leaving its organization to the constituent Cortes. In his speech for the proposal, Pi y Margall, himself a Federalist, renounced for the moment to establish a federal republic, hoping the would-be assembled constituent Cortes to decide over the issue, and announced his acceptance of any other democratic decision. Then another Republican, Emilio Castella, took the floor and said, after Castella's powerful speech, amidst passionate applause, the Republic was declared with the resignation of the monarchists, with 258 votes in favor and only 32 against. The National Assembly assumes all powers and declares the Republic as the form of government of Spain, leaving its organization to the constituent Cortes. An executive power shall be elected directly by the Cortes, and it shall be responsible to the same, in the same session. The first government of the Republic was elected. Federal Republican Estanislao Figueres was elected the first president of the executive power, an office incorporating the heads of state and government. No president of the Republic was ever elected, as the constitution creating such office was never enacted. In his speech, Figueres said that the Republic was like a rainbow of peace and harmony of all Spaniards of goodwill. The passage of these resolutions surprised and stunned most Spaniards, as the recently elected Cortes had a wide majority of monarchists. Ruiz Zorrilla spoke in these terms. I protest and will keep doing so, even if I'm left on my own, against those representatives that, having come to the Cortes as constitutional monarchists, feel themselves authorized to make the decision to turn the nation from monarchist to republican overnight. For most monarchists, though, the impossibility of restoring Isabella II as queen, and the youth of the future Alfonso XII made the Republic the only, though transitory, viable course of action, particularly given the inevitable failure that awaited it. Figueres' government, the first government of the Republic, was formed of federalists and progressives who had been ministers during the monarchy. 4 ministers, in particular, had served with King Amadeo, Echegaray, Becerra, Fernández de Córdoba and Berenguer. At the beginning, they were plagued by a terrible economic situation, with a 546 m peseta budgetary deficit, 153 m in debts requiring immediate payment, and only 32 m available to fulfill them. The artillery corps had been dissolved in the most virulent moment of the Carlist and Cuban wars, for which there were not enough soldiers or armament, nor money to feed or purchase them. Besides, Spain was going through a deep economic crisis matching the Panic of 1873, and which was exacerbated by the political instability. In previous years, unemployment had risen steeply amongst field and industrial workers, and proletarian organizations responded with strikes, demonstrations, protest rallies and the occupation of abandoned lands. On the 23rd of February, the just-elected Speaker of the National Assembly, Radical Cristino Marcos, plotted a failed coup d'état in which the Civil Guard occupied the Ministry of Governance and the National Militia surrounded the Congressive deputies, in order to establish an unitary republic. This prompted the first remodeling of the government, in which the progressives were ousted and replaced with federalists. 12 days after the establishment of the Republic, compulsory military service was removed and voluntary service set up with a daily salary of 1 peseta and 1 crust of bread. A Republican Volunteers Corps was also established with an enlistment salary of 50 pesetas and a daily salary of 2 pesetas and 1 crust of bread. The second Figueres government had to face the attempt of proclamation of the Estate Català inside the Spanish Federal Republic on the 9th of March, which was overcome by a series of telegraphic contacts between the government and the Catalan leaders. On the 23rd of April, a new coup attempt was set in motion, this time by a collusion of Alfonsino monarchists, members of the old Liberal Union and monarchic sectors of the army, but failed when several units refrained from supporting it at the last hour. Francisco Pi y Margall is usually considered the heart of this government, which had to face several problems already endemic to the Republic, such as the Third Carlist War, separatist insurrections, military indiscipline, monarchic plots, etc. His government dissolved the National Assembly and summoned Constituent Cortes for the 1st of May. On the 23rd of April, Cristino Martos, Speaker of the old National Assembly, attempted a new coup, now supported by the civil governor of Madrid. A battalion of militiamen took positions along the Paseo del Prado, and 4,000 more perfectly armed volunteers gathered near Independence Square under the pretext of passing review. Having heard from the plot, Pi y Margall mobilized the civil guard. For his part, after the Minister of War appointed Baltasar Hidalgo as the new Captain General for Madrid, he ordered Brigadier Carmona and a battalion of infantry and various artillery and cavalry units to march on the militiamen. The coup d'état failed as soon as it started, and the government dissolved the military units participating in the Permanent Committee of the Assembly. The writs were issued for Constituent Cortes elections on the 10th of May, which resulted 343 seats for Federal Republicans and 31 for the rest of the political forces. The elections themselves developed in a quite unorthodox environment, and the resulting representation was ridiculous, as most factions in Spain did not participate. The Carlists were still waging war against the Republic, while the Alfonsino monarchists of Antonio Canovas del Castillo, the Unitary Republicans and even the incipient workers' organization close to the First International all called for abstention. The result was clearly favorable to the Federal Republicans, which captured 343 of the 371 seats. But turnout was probably the lowest in Spanish history, with about 28% in Catalonia and 25% in Madrid. The Federal Republic. On the 1st of June 1873, the first session of the Constituent Cortes was opened and the presentation of resolutions began. The first one was debated on the 7th of June, written by 7 representatives. First article. The form of government of the Spanish nation is the Democratic Federal Republic. The resolution was passed the 8th of June by a favorable vote of 219 representatives and only 2 against, and the Federal Republic was thus declared. Most of the Federalists in Parliament supported a Swiss-like confederative model, with regions directly forming independent cantons. Spanish writer Benito Pérez Galdós, aged 21 at the time, wrote about the parliamentary atmosphere of the First Republic. The situation reached such levels of surrealism that, while presiding over a cabinet session, Estanislao Figueres yelled, "Gentlemen, I can't stand this anymore. I am going to be frank with you. I'm fed up with all of us, so fed up that on the 10th of June he left his resignation letter in his office, went for a walk through the Parque del Buen Retiro and, without telling anyone, boarded the first train departing from the Atocha station. He would only step down upon arriving in Paris.